I'm going to basically explain the model in the book. And here it is. It's this sort of 9 things. So I'm really going to kind of talk through that, and we'll then talk a little bit about mindfulness and how it relates. Firstly, I'd like to explain to you how I created the model. I was told that I should create a business model about 10 years ago by some people who ran a business, strangely enough, in Japan. And so I sort of thought, okay, I want to build a model for, there are so many leadership models, and it was quite a long journey, so I want to sort of explain how I came up with it. Then I'll talk to you about the model in more detail, and then I'll link it to mindfulness. Now, mindfulness, in the way I'll explain it, is not to teach you to wear like orange robes and go and sit somewhere in India for many months. It's more the principle of what does mindfulness bring to leadership. Because I've also been studying mindfulness for many years, and I'd like to try and give it a kind of context of how it can be useful in business. All right. So, 3 capability sets. Firstly, as an entrepreneur, I had to start my own business on my own. And I wanted to, in this model, think, what is it that makes somebody successful in business? Now, this is my belief. You may not agree with me. My model is kind of autobiographical. But I believe that you need certain qualities. The first one is leadership. There's something you need to do. If you want to succeed in business, you need to lead yourself, you need to lead others. And that means doing things, right? So many people who come into business just want to do the work, but they need to do leadership. It's one of the tasks. I've also broken down, I know it's a simplification, operations and finance, the kind of task-based things that you need to do in business, making sure that you, in operations, deliver to the customer, and in finance, make sure that there is sufficient money, and also the sort of legal side of a business. The third aspect, pushing the wrong button there, is sales and marketing, which you could expand to be sort of more relationship-orientated skills. So on that basis, these are sort of 3 qualities: leadership, operations and finance, sales and marketing. And what I basically believe, this is my belief, is you will succeed as a leader based not on how good you are at one of these things, but in some senses, the one that you're weakest at will be the thing that makes you potentially fail. Yeah? The classic example, the CFO who becomes the CEO, something goes wrong. Sometimes the CMO who becomes CEO, something goes wrong. What is it? And I'm hoping that my model is a sort of path to becoming kind of a balanced all-round leader. All right. So using the metaphor, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So that's a sort of simple breakdown. Now, oftentimes when I present the model, people say, but operations and finance are not the same thing. I agree, it is different. But kind of bear with me, sometimes a model needs to be a little simpler to make sense. Now, the next part of the model was influenced by this man, one of my favorite books that I first got into in business, Stephen Covey, there he is, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A little show of hands, do you know this book? It's a classic book of the 1980s on leadership and stuff. And there he is. He looks a little bit like Uncle Fester in the program The Monsters. But he's a very impressive guy. And he came up with a really nice saying which inspired me, which was this: trust equals competence plus character. Let me explain to you this in more detail. So let's say, this is a slightly ridiculous example, but it makes it clear. If you had a toilet, and I'm sure all of you have a toilet where you live, is this true? Yes? If it broke down, you would call a plumber. I don't know what a plumber is in French or in Flemish. Plombier, there we are, a similar word. Now, you would trust this plumber if they had competence, right? They had like a certificate, they knew how to do plumbing. You wouldn't just want a nice person. You would want somebody who had competence. But you would also want them to have a good character. Because if you let this person, especially for women, into the bathroom, they could steal your soap and your expensive perfumes, and that would be very depressing, right? So you trust somebody not just because of their competence, but also their character. Is that true? Okay. Now, for me, I thought I could expand on this really kind of simple but powerful idea that you would trust a leader who has competence plus character plus vision. Because if a leader doesn't have vision, you were talking about that thing about purpose. If somebody is just technically very good at something, but they don't somehow have that inspiration that people say, I want to follow that person, that's a lack of vision, yeah? So how do you develop those three? So this is a story. I'm now building the model. How did I take the three qualities plus these, competence plus character plus vision, to create my own model? And here it is, the leadership matrix. Ta-da! And it's on page 12 of the book. Okay, so I'm going to start by just working through it kind of line by line. Each one of these qualities is called an archetype. And I was influenced in creating this model that I believe that people have archetypal qualities. This comes a little bit from mythology, but also from the famous work of Carl Jung. And for those of you who've had to endure MBTI, show of hands, how many of you back in the day? I'm an ENTP and all this? Yeah. Okay, so the idea of archetypes is we all have certain energies. Yeah, and some energies we're better at, and other energies are more of a challenge. So let's begin. Leadership, the compass. So the compass is this idea, which is very much on your idea that you described earlier, Mark, of purpose. A leader needs to be able to share a sense of vision and purpose. You agree with that. But what does that mean? Now, for me, I suppose I have an influence, as Anne-Sophie said, about Santa Cruz, the man there, Robert Dilts, who came up with the so-called leadership pyramid. He said that a leader kind of somehow holds a vision, but they don't possess it. They're not selfish with it. You know, there's a sense that, in my view about leadership, it's something that that a leader holds, but it's not like mine. I don't possess it. It's something that I want to share with other people. Peter Senge, in his famous book, The Fifth Discipline, said that a leader is a steward of a vision. So there's a sense that you somehow hold that vision. But what does this actually mean? I give you an example. I have team coaching. I know this is a big deal. I actually pay an external coach to bring the company that I'm the chairman of onto a sort of every 6 months we go on a few days to do a sort of team coaching and see what's happening. And when the credit crunch ended in about 2010, my CFO, a man called Michael, suddenly came up with a great mission statement, a great sense of a new vision for our business. And when I heard it, I thought, yes, that's it. That's what we must do. And then suddenly a little bit of vanity came on me. And I thought, hang on, I'm the leader. It's his mission. But fortunately, I remembered, it doesn't matter who came up with the vision. It's my job is to hold it, to make sure that when other people get lost in the day job, I can remind them, hello everyone, this is where we're going. And usually the reaction is, oh yes, of course. Now, along with the idea of an archetype, which is the compass, you sometimes sense that in a leader. They have a great sense of vision and purpose. Yeah? Nelson Mandela, he seems to have it, right? He seemed to have a great sense, a kind of a charisma, a sense that people wanted to follow him and trusted him. But with all great quality, as you said, and you mentioned the term in your presentation, there is the idea of a shadow. And the shadow is like the negative manifestation of this positive quality. So what I call the negative manifestation of the compass, I call it the hippie. You know the hippie? The long hair, the beads, you know, going to India, the smelly clothes, yeah. So, and I think that if you are great at the compass, it probably means you have a great hippie inside you. It means you love mindfulness, you love yoga, you love reading books. You take all the books that you've read out on your team. You've read 7 Steps to Leadership Perfection, and the next day your team are suddenly hearing about your enthusiasm. The problem with the hippie is it alienates people. All of us remember Stephen Covey's wonderful influence on American business and the terrible mission statements that came out in the 1980s and how that alienated people. I've seen this myself in my consultancy work, where suddenly a board of directors invents a group of values and suddenly tells everybody, the new CEO is here, and these are your new values. You may have worked here for 30 years, but these are the values of our company. And what is the reaction of the people who work there? They feel alienated. They feel demotivated. I say to my clients, if you are going to push mission on people, push vision, values on people, and at the end of it they feel angry, you're not helping them, you're demotivating them. You'd be better not to do it at all. So I say tread gently. Yes, it's good to have a compass, but if you love this stuff too much, rather than motivate people, you will demotivate them. Does this make sense? The key point about archetypes, because I'll explain it a bit more quickly, but I think it's really important here. When you have a gift, you will also have a shadow. If you've never read any books on management and leadership, then you probably don't have a very big compass. You need to develop it. But if you love this material, then you will also have a big shadow. Does that make sense? The bigger the gift, the bigger the shadow. All right, the next one, you talked about the powerful leadership. The boss. Again, this is an energy where somebody who is a leader, I believe, still needs to have a sense of grounded power. Being able to say no, to be able to assert boundaries, and be able to say no. It stops with me. It's an energy. Do you agree that that energy is important in a leader? I mean, not all the time, but sometimes it's important. If you don't have that power, you don't have the ability to protect your team. You don't have a sense that you're able to protect the business. And that energy is still an important energy today. But this is often confused with what I call the shadow, the bully. Is that a word you all understand? Some of them you may not, but bully is, I think, quite well known. And that is where people who often have this strong energy get angry, maybe they're hungry, maybe they're tired, maybe their energy has dropped, or maybe they just don't have any sense of boundaries, and they start getting really aggressive, and then they start alienating people and breaking relationship. Very common in my coaching of people is they say, I don't ever want to be a boss like that, a bully. So therefore, as the English expression goes, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. They lose the sense of agency and power because they think they're going to be a bully. In fact, you need this energy, and what I say is this, and it's sometimes really an important thing, especially sometimes for women to know this, is that if somebody bullied you before, it meant they didn't have a good boss energy. A good boss energy is something which is a sort of pure quality of power and knowing what you want. If you're spending a lot of your time shouting and screaming at people, it means that you've kind of lost control at some level. But once again, I think it's important to know that if you have this gift of strength and power, you then have a responsibility to manage your shadow. Don't be ashamed of it, just be aware of it. And that's one of the key points in archetype psychology, is if you have a gift, just know that you will have a naturally occurring shadow. Does this make sense? Well, the next one, which I thought maybe slightly self-serving, I came up with a model of the coach. And this is the sense of character being yang and yin. You probably know about yang and yin, you've probably been to the restaurant, I'm sure there's one in Brussels, but it's this idea where there's a kind of stronger energy or a more soft energy. And it's that sort of character, I think, is that right mix. Not too hard, not too soft. So the coach energy is something which is very much the modern leader. They're interested in, as you said, empowering people. They become very good listeners. Many of the people who come on my training, and I'm sure that's true today with you here, have been on coach training. Maybe you're already qualified as coaches. You start listening. I think about this myself. When I first started in business, I used to tell everybody what to do. They'd come into my office, I'd say, do this, do that, do the other, goodbye, next. And that was all I did. Then, as I started employing more and more competent people, I came in and I said, so what are you going to do? And I just listened, and they'd say, that's good. 10 minutes later, they'd leave feeling kind of empowered. So I think the coach is a very important energy. I also think that there is an important training in coaching is you read body language, which is also very useful. So there are wider benefits to this sort of coach quality. I think it's fairly obvious what it means. but it has a shadow, as all of them do. Shall I tell you what I've called the shadow? You excited to find out? I've called the shadow the psychoanalyst. And the psychoanalyst is where, and I've seen this, I've sometimes wondered if I did it myself in the early days. You have now been on a 20-day coach training, you come back to the office and you start almost manipulating people with your new energy, like you're offering them therapy. And they start telling you things and they tell you more, and before you know it, they've told you so much stuff that you are now in a conflict of interest. Because what they've told you may be significant to them, but is against the benefit of the business. And with this conflict, you may use it against them. As a leader, if people think that you will manipulate them in this way, it'll be terrible for your reputation, right? It's very poor integrity. The other one is maybe some of your staff will manipulate you. They know that you love to do coaching and therapy, so you will suddenly find that they'll come along and tell you all their problems so that you can give them a pay rise. Maybe. You get the idea. Again, it seems natural. The journey of becoming a coach is also the journey, in some sense, of learning a little bit about therapy and learning about personal development, but it's understanding the boundary. At the end of the day, you can lead with a coaching style, but you cannot be the coach of your staff because you have an agenda. When I'm coaching someone, I don't have an agenda. I don't care what they do, it's their life. But if I'm coaching someone who works for me, I do care what they do. And that's a conflict. So that must make less sense. Okay. So that's the first row, which I've called leadership. I've just basically say that a great leader needs all of these qualities. One of them is leadership, and that's that ability. Does this make sense so far? I'll do the second row. Operations and finance. Now, I, in the 1980s, was one of the first people who was lucky enough to go to university at the time when they had the invention of the microcomputer. So in 1983, whenever I was at university, they actually had, PC come out. So when I started a business, I loved all that repetitive systems. I think McDonald's is a brilliant business. I hate the food, but it's all based on brilliant structure and processes and systems and continual improvement. It's still a good thing, isn't it? It's good to keep improving a business. It can always get better. And I think it's true to say that great businesses have got great systems, and to me, actually, the compass is something we do not that often. You don't want to change direction very much. You don't want to go and have new values every week, right? But the architect is something that you really need to do almost every day. Challenge the systems. Are they working? Can they get better? Have things moved? This, to me, in some sense, is probably where I think a leader should be spending the majority of their time, is making sure that their business works well and improves. This quality, though, has a shadow, which I called the tinkerer. It's an English term that very few people, when I've taught it outside of England, have ever understood. It basically means somebody who likes to play with things and never can finally get it launched. And this leads beautifully into the idea of the lean startup. The lean startup, you probably know about minimum viable products and this whole kind of new business model that has come out of Silicon Valley, of get something out there, get it to work. This idea of getting a minimum viable product and getting used to an interactive way of developing it quickly. In changing times, we don't have the luxury of months or years. I think you probably remember in your own career working in a very large corporate bank, which I would say was, that you came up with some brilliant solution with technology which sounded brilliant, and it took so long to happen that by the time you made it, it was all over. So this is one of the great challenges for businesses today. How do you actually move fast enough so that you actually can produce something that works? It must be a serious challenge for everyone. And that thing that I believe is awfully good is the express train. This is the energy of the leader who says, let's make it happen, get it done, do it now. Yeah? I remember I gave a presentation on leadership in London, and there was a journalist from The Guardian. It's a kind of left-wing newspaper in England, quite a famous one, you might know it. And she said, the thing I like in a leader is somebody who makes it happen. Yeah? And so often in organizations, leaders talk a lot but never get stuff done. For many, that getting it done, that energy to make it happen, is the most important thing. Speaking personally, I think it is my best energy. It is also my worst energy. Because what I've said, the shadow of the express train, that getting it done energy, I've called the steamroller, where you move too fast and you begin to crush people. Interestingly, there is a little French story behind this, if I can do a small detour. I was sitting there in Versailles, quite just before I went to the BNP Paribas leadership thing I was doing, and I was just thought I'd visit Versailles, and I was sitting outside of Versailles thinking about this model, and I thought there's something missing. What is it? And then I looked at Versailles, I went, ha-ha, if you are a leader and you push people so hard and you don't notice that they're getting really upset, what is likely to happen to you? Yes, it's not very good. Yes, it's a painful ending, right? So knowing that, yes, it's important to push and get energy and, motivate, but also having a sense of when you've gone too far. And that moves beautifully into the alarm bell. The alarm bell, for me, is a really important leadership ingredient. It's a sense when something has gone really wrong. Yeah? And I relate it personally to my experience of leading the business I own during the credit crunch. I was happily doing leadership development and all the rest of it. I came to London and I noticed that all of my team seemed perfectly relaxed about the ongoing start of the credit crunch. They were like, don't worry, we'll find other customers, we'll find new banks. I, who had been in business for, now 30 years, remembered the 1990s, remembered when interest rates in England were 15%, and I started feeling it physically here. I felt, no, this is not business as usual. This is a problem, and we have to do something about it. And let's be honest, if you're a leader and you can't see something coming, if you're like driving the boat towards the Titanic iceberg, thank you, and you don't notice it, never mind, what do you think is going to happen to your career? Yeah, if you don't have this ability to know when something is really wrong, you're going to be finished. Look at the CEO of the Royal Bank of Scotland in England. 87 billion he lost. He's never going to get a job again, is he? I mean, yeah. Mind you, Tony Hayward did okay, so you never know. Anyway, it wasn't really his fault. So the alarm bell has obviously an important quality, but I've called the problem of the alarm bell also has a shadow. Because as a leader, you can begin to become overly stressed. And I've called the shadow the headless chicken. Poulet sans tête, there we are in French, that's it. So that you can have a sense where, and I think I experienced this as well, is a sense of being highly stressed, and that is a very good way to drain all of your energy, and if you have all your energy drained, it's very, very difficult. So there's the operations and finance row. I think that somebody who's great at operations and finance tend to be very good at developing systems. Often people in finance are pretty good with the alarm bell. They're worried about running out of money, yeah? Which is good. And the express train is often that operations side of getting it done, and that's why I've sort of combined it into two. All right, sales and marketing. The sense of vision for me in here is again, a different sense of vision, and that's a sense of having a radar, a sense of what is going on outside of the business, not just inside. What is happening to the market? What is happening socio-politically? What is having that kind of bigger sense? The nice story I have about this is I have a relative from Canada, and he is in a clothing business. He has a large business where they manufacture some kind of clothes. And every year he comes to London and he walks up and down Oxford Street, and he tells me next year orange will be the colour. I have no idea how he does this. I will walk up and down Oxford Street next year, and it could be pink, it could be orange, it could be black, I have no idea. But somehow, he's never got it wrong. I don't know why. He has an instinct for the market he operates in. I have a belief that a leader often is good when they know their market and they don't shift from manufacturing into banking, into retail, into this and that. Staying a little bit in your own, in a certain sector, gets a bit more of an instinct of the market in that sector, but it's something wider. So does that make sense of the kind of energy? The radar is that quality of being able to really have a sense of the market. And I found actually, interestingly, that there is also this kind of, for people who have that, they often love reading books about psychology, but kind of something more like Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, you know, looking for patterns, looking for processes. They're interested in sociology, economics. I'm sure the book Sapiens would be just up their street. It's that kind of love of looking at things from a more kind of, I don't know, generalized perspective. The shadow of the radar I call the guru. And the guru is that energy where you sometimes meet a leader where the saying, nothing fails like success. Once you've been successful a number of times, suddenly the leader believes themselves. If I can use a euphemistic term, they believe their own bullshit. They think anything they say or think is the truth. And this is really dangerous ground. This is, it goes back in time, the emperor without clothes. But it's very difficult not to know, because if you're a leader, you have to have a sense of confidence in your decision making. But as you said, you also need to have some humility, that you're not going to get it right all the time. And what's the most you can lose? So this is an interesting quality. And I've had personal experience of leaders that once they got into the guru, there is only one way, and that's down. Okay, the next one is the fox. Now the fox is this energy that is possibly a bit more cunning. Sometimes people immediately have a negative emotional response to this image of the fox, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it. I'm doing a leadership program at the moment for SPIE, the French engineering company with the Polytechnic in France, and I met this guy who was like one of their CEOs of one of their divisions, and he said, I am like a street fighter. If anyone comes to threaten my business, I would fight them, but I fight dirty, in the gutter. And it struck me as a little strange because he was, you know, had a PhD in engineering and had worked for a large corporation. It seemed, would he really do that? I don't know. But he expressed a passion. And it's a passion that if you are a leader and your business is about to go bankrupt, how far would you go to protect your staff, to protect the business and the shareholders? You know, it's easy to say you don't know. If you give up too quickly, that's not so good. You need sometimes to be a little bit cunning to succeed, right? Do you agree? The other thing I think about the fox is for people who come sometimes from an accountancy or engineering background, they don't like salespeople. They think that they're sort of charlatans or something like that. But if you are a leader, you have to love doing deals. I have never met a successful leader who isn't a great deal maker. Do you agree? Well, that's interesting about your beliefs, you see, because you may believe it's not, and this is part of the whole journey. If one of these things seems repellent to you, be curious. Is that something to do with my beliefs about what I can do, what I'm comfortable about? A good way of framing it, though, is that the fox also has a shadow, and I've called that the crook, the criminal. And sometimes people in business do become a little bit go too far. And I say there's an easy way to work out when you've gone too far. There's a famous saying in America which is, don't bet the farm, right? Just extend that, don't bet yourself. You're about to make a decision. It's a really important decision. You don't want the business to go under. If it goes wrong, you go to prison for 20 years, don't do it, okay? Bad decision. Yeah, don't bet yourself. But more seriously, this kind of fox quality is, I think, an important thing, because let me ask you another question. If a leader does not have an instinct where they can smell someone who is bad news, who is not cunning and street smart, would you trust that leader? And if you're saying no, then this is an important quality to have, but don't confuse it with the crook. Okay, and lastly, friend. Many great leaders I know, by the time they're in their mid-30s, already have a whole group of people they know. They already have contacts in law firms. I remember I was speaking to a partner, she was a legal director of a large company in Britain. And she used to work at a large law firm in England, I think it was Slaughter and May. And she said, I know all of the various partners in the law firm, so I can call them up and get advice, and I know what to do, and so on. So in many ways, the leadership is also the network you bring. Is that not fair? Developing a network, having that external network, having the internal network, that kind of friend quality, right? So I think that's also an important ingredient. It also seemed to feature in your model, is that sense about networking, creating networks internally and externally. The one I've called that, the shadow, I've called the creep. And the creep, does this make sense, the term creep to you, some of you? Is that, I don't know about you, but when I was 16 and I used to go to parties, I used to feel very uncomfortable, and I used to try and make jokes so people would like me. Other people, push themselves forward too much. Other people are shy and they sit down. I think it's a universal quality that we all know what it was like to be 16 and not be really sure of ourselves, yes? That's the shadow, in a sense, is saying, okay, somebody who is good at the friend, who is good at developing contacts, every now and again, you're going to be a bit creepy. That's okay. Don't give up. Keep building those networks. Make sense? Okay. You don't want to be the one who sits in the corner saying, not speaking to anyone. That's not going to work as a leader. And if it's difficult for you, that's fine. Because one of the key points I say, because I've now described all of them, is this. Leadership success means you're not going to be brilliant at all of these. But I go back to that thing about the chain. But you need to be at least okay at all of them. If you are awful at one of them, I think you will fail as a leader. Yeah? As I said, you don't need to be fantastic. Now, I remember when I taught this on one course, a guy put up his hand and he said to me, unless I can do something perfectly, I won't do it at all. Yeah? Quite a common thing, especially in certain professional trainings. If you're a lawyer and engineer, the bridge fell down. Never mind. Yeah. There is a training to be perfect, but you cannot be perfect as a leader. You need to be good enough. Okay. I've got what? 5, 10 more minutes? Something like that. So I will take questions, but before I do, I just want to touch a little bit on the conductor, which is the next slide, in the corner. So what is the conductor? The conductor, it's mindful management of the qualities. So my belief about a leader is you will be in many different situations. You may need to work with a finance director, a marketing director, a member of staff, an operations director, a human resources director. It depends what you're doing, a technology, CIO, CFO, all these different people. When you go into that meeting, you need to, in some senses, be able to connect with that energy and have it in you so that you can manage the person, that they sense that you know enough that they won't try and bullshit you. Yeah? To me, I see this with my CFO. Often he looks at me, and I'm sure he's saying to himself, do I have to tell him this? There's a little pause. I look at him, he looks at me, and then he sighs, he goes, and then he tells me whatever it is. Because he knows that if he doesn't tell me, he's going to be in big trouble. Right? That, to me, is what leadership is about, to some degree. Does this make sense? That the people who work for you may not always particularly feel happy about it, but they know at the end of the day they have to be open and not hide things. The minute you lead a team where people are hiding things from you, you're in trouble. The conductor then is this kind of next bit. I would invite you to read the book. I only have a limited time to talk about this. Is often we can become quite emotional as leaders. Now, emotion is a good thing because if you're not emotional, you have no passion. Yeah? But at the same time, if we are overwhelmed with emotion, we can make bad decisions. So having a sense of being able to be detached and have a sense of mindful detachment, which I think kind of fits in very well with your idea of building energy. Keeping that little bit of detachment allows you to become aware which of these qualities is appropriate for the situation. Somebody has come into my office. Do I need to be the boss? Do I need to be the coach? Does this begin to make sense? Now, all right, I appreciate you can't do this all the time. Ultimately, you would need to do this intuitively. But at some level, you can begin to learn, especially your weak areas. You can practice them deliberately and consciously, and then over a period of time, they will become more intuitive. All right, well, I think that's kind of, I feel I've talked quite a lot. Have I talked quite a lot? And I really appreciate you all inviting me here. Thank you very much, I really appreciate it.